Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Snow, the Chief Development Officer for Open Networking Foundation. We have a very interesting presentation today about how to take open source software to production readiness through the ONF Distributed Devops process. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Suchitra Vemuri, the ONF Director of QA. Suchitra has been at ONF for almost 4 years and is responsible for all of ONF efforts around testing and test automation. She's an expert in bringing together communities to build highly efficient automated test processes. Prior to ONF, she was at Fujitsu Network Communication in hands-on test and leadership roles. So my pleasure. Suchitra, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Hello, everyone. I'm Suchitra Vemuri, and today I would like to talk about and share some of my experiences with taking open source software from ONF using the distributed DevOps approach to production readiness. So in order to deliver a carrier-grade production-ready software to a service provider, it represents a big challenge. And because it involves multiple components, the software components and the hardware components. And not just that, then in order to deliver the software using this new CI/CD paradigm and approaches like the DevOps approaches, it makes it even harder. And delivering it in an open source environment where multiple companies are involved, where all multiple companies have different levels of commitment, makes it even more impossible. So as a challenge, how does one ensure quality software in an open source based solution? There are many questions and questions that needs to be answered. Like as an example, open source community involves multiple companies, and each company has its own processes. And how do we organize these companies? And who will take the ownership of issues, and who will how to resolve these issues as quickly as possible? And how do we establish common code and common coding and testing guidelines? Because again, it has multiple companies with different processes and mindsets. And taking a software to production ready involves a lot of comprehensive testing. And in order to achieve that, we need a very good automation framework. And how do we create a common automation framework, which it could be shared across the community, which will help resolve all these complexities involved in testing the software. And another important thing and aspect in the testing is to take the production, to take the software to a production ready, we definitely need to involve real world production type traffic. So how do we include this kind of production traffic and make the software ready to a production level? This slide here shows couple production releases achieved by the ONF community. We have the Trellis. Trellis is a multi-purpose leaf spine fabric which runs on ONOS and supports distributed access networks and edge cloud applications. And ONF worked with Comcast and community and helped take the software to production, and currently it is deployed in over 20 plus geographies with a total of 300K subscribers. And the second project, which recently we deployed OMEC project in Poland, T-Mobile Poland. This is the high performance open EPC, which provides fixed mobile substitution in the Polish market. And the first rollout was already made, and there are limited friendly customers who are actually trying it for a 30-day grace period, and which was a great success. And the current project that ONF is working on is the SEBA Voltha, which involves operators like AT&T, DT, and Telecom. And SEBA at a high level provides a variety of virtualized access technologies at the edge of the carrier network. So in this presentation, I would like to take an example of the SEBA Voltha, which is currently being worked on by ONF, and we are taking it with the help of the community, taking the SEBA Voltha to production readiness, and we will talk through more in the next few slides. A quick look on the SEBA. This slide shows a high-level picture of SEBA and the various components that are involved in SEBA. What is SEBA? SEBA is a SDN-enabled broadband access that provides fiber to home, fiber to the building. And if you see the picture, the black boxes here shows the hardware components, and the ONUs on the customer side are connected to the OLT boxes, which are at the service provider's office. And these OLTs are in turn connected upstream to the switches, which are actually called the aggregation switches. And these switches are again connected upstream to the external BNG. And these switches are actually connected in turn to the servers, and the servers contain the software components which are involved as part of Dockers using the Kubernetes. These are the tools that we use as part of the software installations. And if you see the software stack, Voltha Voltha provides an abstraction of the PON network. It manages the OLT and the ONUs through the fiber distribution network. On top of Voltha, we have the SDN controller, which is the ONOS, and ONOS has multiple different applications, and these applications help manage the PON network and the switches in the pod. And on top of ONOS, we have the network edge mediator layer, and this layer provides the orchestration of various operator workflows like AT&T, DT, and Turk Telecom. And it also provides NBIs to manage the PON network, manage all the components in the pod. And it also provides as a backend to the customer backend interactions as well. So this is a quick look at the SEBA Voltha project with various software and hardware components that are involved, and it has it's a quite mixture of components that are involved, which is quite complex to test. So how do we test this kind of software to production level? Let's compare taking it with an independent vendor versus open source. How would we do if it was in vendor setting and an open source environment? So the table here shows the differences of various aspects in terms of an independent vendor and open source. So let's say the authority and responsibility in a vendor, it lies within the vendor because it's a single business unit. Whereas in the open source, we have multiple organizations involved. So somebody needs to establish the authority and responsibility, and in SEBA Voltha, we are doing that as part of coordination done by ONF. And in a vendor, in the organization, there are multiple groups, development groups, there are test groups doing various kinds of activities. And in an open source setting, we have groups which are spread across organizations doing various kinds of activities. And the process and workflow defined in a vendor is done by the vendor and recognized by the organization, whereas there are multiple processes and workflows available in the open source because it involves multiple companies there. And how about the tools and frameworks? The tools and frameworks are all well given in an independent vendor, and which are known to the developers and testers. Whereas in open source, tools and frameworks are completely different, and there are each organization which are involved as part of the community, they have their own tools and framework. And there should be a comprehensive types of testing available in a vendor setting. The vendors, there are multiple groups that help do different kinds of testing. And in an open source environment, these types of testing would spread across the community. And when it comes to field deployments, vendor works very closely with the operator, whereas in the open source, vendor ONF helps coordinate these activities and works closely with the operator. So these are some differences that are that shows the complexity that are involved in part of testing the production. So can we achieve a better result in an open source environment, which includes better test coverage, faster issue discovery and resolution? How do we get to faster time to scale and performance? And if there are changes that happen in future or requirement changes happen, and how do we incorporate these changes with faster turnaround times and get to a stable quality product? Can we do that? So the answer is yes. We have the ONF community test processes defined, and let's see how we do that. So here are some of our best practices um, for the which are defined as part of ONF community testing. We believe in distributed DevOps and define good processes for CI/CD that helps establish various a common coding and testing guidelines across the community, uh, establish good continuous feedback model, establish good turnaround times for handling, for finding bugs and resolving bugs. And automation is the key, where we believe in automation and automate as much as possible with the best tools and frameworks in place. And test automation is also required in various types of testing. It could be ranging from unit test to the system testing to the stability, soap testing, scale, and performance. So a quick look on the DevOps model. DevOps helps DevOps software strategy builds bridges gap between the development and operation side of the company and helps us deliver quality software in time. So on the left hand side of this picture shows the development operations, and the right hand side shows the operation side of these operations. And there is in a DevOps model, there is a continuous feedback loop that happens between these two sides of the companies and help deliver quality software in time. And for the integration part, we use the open source Jenkins. We heavily use this as part of CI/CD processes. And for frameworks, concentrating on the test frameworks here, we have multiple unit test frameworks available. And for the system test kind of frameworks, we do have component verifications. We use robot framework. So expanding this DevOps model, ONF has the distributed DevOps approach. For SEBA Voltha project, this is the green box over here, which shows the resources from the ONF, operators, and the community. And the entire contributor and the resources were broken down into various brigades or work groups. And there were 7 brigades as part of SEBA Voltha project. And there was a clear defined processes and workflows were defined as part of this approach. And each brigade has some specific goals and objectives to perform. And the brigade's progress was also monitored, reviewed, and shared with the operators and time to time, and getting more feedback and then making more changes as we go through the project. And the communication, a very good, using this approach, a very good communication was established between the operators, not just the operators, but even within the groups, within the brigade groups, and also across the groups. And that helped the velocity to maintain the velocity of the project. So broadly, when we talk about testing in DevOps, when we look at this picture, these are the broad classifications of stages in DevOps, concentrating on the continuous integration and the delivery part. In the continuous integration, we are talking about building the code and performing code reviews and doing various kinds of testing. So we define functional testing, unit testing, and integration testing in some cases. And once the patches are merged, then there is a continuous delivery phase where we are deploying these software onto the test servers and performing end-to-end user testing, where a heavy integration testing or the system testing is being performed. In order to develop a good CI/CD approaches, a common test automation framework needs to be put in place. And in the SEBA Voltha project, with the help of the community, we defined a good common automation framework that was shared across the community that helped solve multiple problems. We used the robot framework open source tool to write the entire framework, and this framework supports various operator workflows, AT&T, DT, and Turk Telecom, and the framework also supports testing the hardware and the simulated the OLTs and ONUs, and it provided great capabilities of logging and debugging capabilities, and that helped the development to debug through the issues and resolve the issues quickly. And the framework also helped solve many kinds of complex testing types, where it included functional stability type of testing, data plane, and failure restart based kinds of testing. So using that framework, um, we had used it is part of path set verifications as well. So this is a general idea of how path set verifications were done as part of CI/CD, and as part of the source code there were more than almost 40 plus repos available, and Jenkins was the server that was used to build, deploy, and test. And the unique part of the path set verifications is that we were not only testing on the BBSIM or the simulated platform, but we were also testing on the hardware. And that helped find bugs much earlier before even we deployed to the test servers. And there were more than almost 250 CI jobs available. And the feedback was always going to the developers with the success and failure rate. So we established a closed loop feedback over here. And the main highlights of these path set verifications helped maintain the developer velocity and then provided a faster feedback for finding bugs. So this slide gives a quick look on the CI/CD jobs that are available as part of SEBA Voltha. Here in the red circle over here just shows quickly what kind of tests a particular repo is going through. Let's say Voltha Go is going through some kind of testing over here. And the next set of jobs that we introduced were the nightly jobs, where the deployment style jobs, continuous delivery or the continuous deployment style jobs, where the source code was pulled every night and the build server Jenkins used to deploy, configure the pods, and these were hitting the pods. And there were 5 pods which were from the community and at the ONF, and almost all test suites were run as part of these jobs and published the results to Jenkins. And again, from the Jenkins, the feedback was taken to the development and other groups. And this again helped a comprehensive testing types, which helped resolve issues, find bugs, and resolve issues. Again, this is a quick look from the Jenkins report at ONF, where we have, which it shows the various CD style jobs. And if you notice here in this red circle again, there is CD jobs are running on master and the released based, and it applies to various pods, and it also applies on QS profiles, technology profiles, and also operator workflows. So I've been talking about the hardware test pods, and we had used in SEBA Voltha pods across the community. As the picture shows here, there are pods in Berlin, in Infosys India, and there is one in Tucson and 2 in Menlo at ONF. So as a summary, these are the testing types that were performed as part of the SEBA Voltha project. So unit testing, almost every repo had a very good unit test coverage, and many of the feature areas also consisted with component and functional verifications, and end-to-end user testing, the system testing or the user validation testing was also performed heavily, and many scenarios have been created. And we have a comprehensive testing styles like the stability testing, failure recovery, data plane, error checks, etc. And another important part is also being achieved is the scale and performance testing. A quick look on the automation status and progress. This table here just shows a progressive representation of how automation has picked up over the releases. And this test automation helped catch several bugs, and the result, and were able to also resolve the issues at the same time. So what have we achieved so far with SEBA Voltha? As a quick recap, we have aligned almost 11 community organizations, more than 11 community organizations towards a common set of goals, and developed closed feedback loop between testing and development, and this helped resolve finding and resolving the bugs. And we created common automation framework that helped achieve multiple types of testing. And as we went through the project, the processes around CI/CD project became more and more robust, and that helped deploy the ports around the community, and then run a common set of test cases, and that helped keep everybody up to date, and always kept the velocity and maintained the velocity of the project, always increasing in an increasing path. So what's missing as part of SEBA Voltha? And the next steps as part of the test automation, in order to reduce time to production, continuous deployment is very important, and we need to deploy the staging pods or the field pods continuously and run production type of payloads or production traffic in order to catch bugs earlier, and then get an idea before the deployment happens. And also another important aspect is providing the monitoring tools and systems on these staging pods for feedback and disaster recovery procedures. And automation is our key. So we plan to increase more other comprehensive testing types like the SOAK testing, Chaos Monkey, and more automation of newer features, and few other complex features that are still pending. So going back to our first slide where we had many questions that we had put through before we went to the presentation. So how did we organize this community spanning multiple companies with different processes? We had the distributed DevOps processes where we were able to align various companies and to follow a common set of goals. And how did we have the ownership of issues and how to resolve these issues quickly? The ONF, through the distributed DevOps approach, we had divided into various brigades, and the brigades had the ownership of various issues related to a specific component, and then that's how we quickly got to resolve these issues. And how did we establish common coding and testing practices? So again, through the distributed DevOps approach, we defined various workflows and processes and set up some good coding and testing guidelines and practices, which were followed and agreed by the community. And how did we create the common automation framework? So with the use of the open source, as we talked earlier, so with the use of the open source tools such as the robot framework and Jenkins, we were able to achieve a common framework that was shared across the community. And through Jenkins, we were able to deploy various types of styles of jobs that helped tame the complexities for us. And how to include real world production traffic in order to get to the production level. So through the use of common pods or sharing pods from the operators and run the production traffic on them using the new CI/CD practices that were put as part of the SEBA. So in summary, community testing of open source solutions to production level from open source community is difficult, but it can be achieved. And we have seen an example from SEBA and other projects. And ONF provides the needed focus which are required to coordinate multiple organizations. We have the distributed DevOps practice where using a common tooling and with the extensive automation, we were able to help shortening test cycles and improving quality. And we have made good progress in the project, but there is more work that is needed for a continuous deployment style and continue the project further. So with that, I would say, please join ONF community, contribute and shape the project. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity to share my experience with you all.
Thank you, Suchitra. Wow, that was quite the journey. And I know you've still got further to go. So certainly not easy to coordinate that many organizations, I'm sure. I'm curious, what's been the most challenging part of getting a community to work together towards a common goal?
There are, for me, there were a couple of things. First one was the commitment and ownership. Luckily with the SEBA Voltha project, because we had a clear ownership defined and commitment was not a big problem. But the biggest challenge was to agree from the community to bring up the pods that we want to run, to have more and more pods connected to the Jenkins and run these automation tests so that we can have a faster issue where we can find issues faster and resolve issues faster. So that helps us to also get a feeling of how the software is running on various types of hardware as well. So that's a challenge, and that is what we are still working on, and talking to the community and encouraging them to do that.
Okay. So you've led test efforts for both a large vendor as well as an open source community now, and I'm curious if you went back to work for a vendor again. What type of changes would you make from what you've learned in leading open source testing?
Yeah, definitely. There are many good things that I learned as part of the working in the ONF. One important aspect that I found that I could apply back to any other vendor company when I go back and work is automation is the key. So try to automate as much as possible, whichever processes it could be, any small processes that it could be, not just like test automation, but any processes that help us speed up and maintain the velocity of the project. I would completely encourage doing so. And then choosing the right set of CI/CD tools is also an important key along with the automation, and they go hand in hand. And this is what I would encourage, and then I would look to implement.
Okay, all right, thanks. Just one last question. I'm curious, as you move forward towards production with Deutsche Telekom, what's the main thing that you'd really like to focus on to improve?
Yeah, We have done great improvements in test automation, but I think one main important goal, which I also put as part of one of the slide, is in order to take and reduce time to production, the important step is to have the operators share their field networks, because we need to network awareness is one of the most important thing, and also not even having the awareness is one thing, and then you implement on these particular networks, and then deploy the software on time to time, and also run the testing with run tests with the production payloads, which is very important, and that would help take us and then provide us good faster approaches to production.
Okay. All right. Super. Hey, thanks very much for sharing your experience with us today. It's been a really interesting presentation and appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks a lot. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.